capture is the technology they use to capture performances of actors and then translate that to 3D data that we then apply to our characters. There's a series of cameras set up in an array around the room. They're basically capturing markers that are set up at specific key points on the character to ensure that we have articulation at each joint. That data is captured with infrared cameras that reflect back the information to the cameras, and then that data is triangulated. The talent we get are really true professionals. They've been doing acting and stunt work for many years, so they take direction really well.
You just have to be a kid, I think. At the end of the day, you have to remember what it was like to be a little kid running through the woods playing, cops and robbers.
It's just a matter of really thinking like a good actor and trying to say, how does this character carry themselves? What is it that's affecting their body as they move? And just trying to visualize yourself in a different set of bones and different skin.
Forgetting what you look like, I think, is one of the greatest challenges that any actor for motion capture has, because basically they're just using your skeleton or your joints, and they're superimposing another character that probably looks nothing like you whatsoever. But I think once you see what the character looks like with your movements, that's a really big step for any motion capture actor to just realize that it's not you at all.
So basically I give them an insight into the character that they're performing, give them a little background on who the character is, what the character means to the game. And a lot of times we just let talent perform impromptu and kind of freestyle a little bit. So we give them a lot of creative input on how they want to play the character.
If I'm lucky, I know kind of what the game is about, what kind of characters I'm looking at before I go into the shoot. And honestly, I sit down and play a lot of video games the night before to try to get just a reference point of what it would be like to actually swing at these things.
Motion capture is basically a tool for the animators to kind of push the limits of the animation. It gives us the fidelity, we get the subtleties of the motion. What we're able to do with it is push it beyond the limits of what a human can do.
When you pick up a game today, the movement of it, the acting within the game, the characters themselves move and are so much more developed than characters that had been hand animated just in the computer from games, even a few years ago. And I think today's gamers really expect to see that next level of real performance. You hear criticism on both sides. You hear, oh, now the performances aren't real performances because it's somebody else's skin on the screen or whatever. I think that the challenges are even tougher for the actor now. Getting an authentic, real performance to play through a digital skin, I think takes a lot of skill and a lot of thinking about your technique and making sure that you're giving an honest, authentic performance.
The main contribution that we wanted to bring to the franchise that calls on horror, that calls on really good storytelling, that calls on visceral combat is Divergent co-op.
The idea with the Divergent co-op in F.E.A.R 3 is to give the players asymmetrical play. We wanted to do something different, have each player experience the game differently.
What we mean by that is that each player has unique sets of abilities. Now, when you play together these different sets of abilities, you create a whole slew of different ways that the players can strategize to set up tactics to combat the enemies.
Well, when playing co-op, you can't always trust what the other player is going to do. The way that we're doing the scoring in the game, players are playing together to win points, but they're also playing against each other.
Fiddle on one hand, he can grab somebody, use them as a meat shield, and he's consistently working his way through that space and killing guys. My favorite power that Fiddle has is possession.
So let's say there's a sniper up on the rooftop and you want to create this flanking situation. Fiddle can just possess that guy up there and become a sniper for that moment.
And then you have Point Man, who's more of a classic first-person shooter player and has the ability to use 360 cover and slow-mo.
Adding co-op impacts the franchise in a very positive way. Co-op just inherently asks the player to replay the game numerous times. I mean, the whole idea of sharing the fear with your buddy, with some stranger, it just created a whole new type of F.E.A.R experience that I think will really forever change the F.E.A.R franchise in future.
We have to think about things as a family.
We first met day one when they were working on the port of the F.E.A.R 1 PC game to the PlayStation 3 and the Xbox 360.
One of the things that we wanted to make sure we leveraged was the established relationship that we had with Monolith when we had done some of the work for them on the ports, and making sure that the original F.E.A.R has that same experience that was great on the PC and we bring it to the consoles. And what they talked to us about was focusing on very, very good AI, focusing on horror, and then focusing on combat. We had friends there, we knew them, we had a good relationship, and we leveraged that as we went and worked on F.E.A.R 3.
When we thought about what F.E.A.R 3 should become, we started talking with Day One in about 2008 about how can we evolve this franchise and really capture the essence of what it is, but growing it into something that's bigger, something that's more amazing and delivers a better experience for the consumer.
Monolith and Day One coming together to work together on F.E.A.R 3 has been a really interesting process because you think about it as almost two teams. But the reality is that what we wanted to do was make sure we had one team, that we brought the best parts of Monolith and their understanding of the F.E.A.R franchise, and then we marry it with Day One's expertise in mech combat and combat in general.
Day One is able to take that experience and bring it into F.E.A.R because F.E.A.R has mech combat. And so we set up a lot of meetings between the two studios to share that experience. We shared a lot of ideas about how to create good horror for video games, to properly scare the player, to create that great tension, to create that awesome type of atmosphere that puts the player on edge.
Hi, welcome to F.E.A.R 3 Developer Q&A. Thanks to everyone out there who's sending questions. We received a lot of good ones, so let's just jump right in. Our first question is, where do you at Day One find inspiration when making F.E.A.R 3?
The first thing we had to do was I had to get familiarized with horror in general, and I went and I rented hundreds, literally, of movies, everything from Japanese horror to American horror to like international horror, and really got a sense of what's scary and what's not so scary, and tried to understand why some things worked and other things didn't. Something that really inspired me is a 50 cal bullet. This is the BMG that's used in a lot of long-range sniper rifles. And this is what I want players to fire. So I designed the sniper rifle to use this type of bullet, which is just massive over-penetration. It's just gonna blow dudes in half. Small things like this really help to set a goal, to say like, okay, what would it be like to fire a gun that used this kind of bullet, and what kind of experience would that be? So between the Japanese horror and the American horror, international horror films, between the games that have come before us, and then everyday inspirations, I think we've got a good accumulation of inspiration.
Thanks a lot. Our second question is, what is the generative system and how does it work?
The generative system is a process the game uses to spawn new AI and new horror events as the player moves through a level. The player's experiences are tracked, and this data is used by the game to ramp the intensity. The system's intent is to allow multiple playthroughs through a level without the player being able to determine when or where horror or AIs will be spawned.
Our last question is, what kind of weapons can injure and kill F.E.A.R?
F.E.A.R is subject to all the same damage that Point Man is, so weapons, environmental hazards, all that stuff will damage F.E.A.R in the same way that it damages Point Man. He's not invincible.
And that's it. Thanks again for all of you for sending in your questions. Be sure to follow F.E.A.R 3 on Facebook and Twitter to find out when your next chance to submit new questions will be. Thanks again for watching, and we look forward to hearing from you.
Point Man's New Year's resolution is going to be to stop taking out his anger on his brother F.E.A.R, i.e. shooting him in the head.
I think Point Man would be wise once this little adventure is over to look at ways to reduce his stress level at work. I've noticed the guy rarely smiles. In fact, I don't think I've ever seen him break a smile one time, but I think that was wind.
I think Point Man's New Year's resolution is going to be to speak up when he doesn't like what's going on.
I think F.E.A.R would probably want to quit smoking.
I think F.E.A.R's New Year's resolution is going to be to pay a little more attention to his diet, be a little more picky about what he's putting into his body.
Well, I think Alma's New Year's resolution is to lose that pregnant fat and get her girlish figure back.
I think Alma's is pretty clear to me. I mean, firstly, quit drinking. I mean, look what happened last New Year's Eve. I think it might be worth her considering going back to school. I mean, she's of an age where, you know, she's still got a few years ahead of her. She could make some different life choices and actually make something of the, you know, of her skill set and develop that some. And let's be honest, with something on the way, she's going to need to have a decent income coming in to support that as a mother.
I think Alma's New Year's resolution will be to find a better babysitter. Grandfather didn't work out so well last time.
Alma's New Year's resolution is going to be to treat her boyfriends a little bit better.